Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Beatles Forever. Today we're going to see what happened when the Beatles played their last concert. The Beatles' last concert took place on August 29, 1966, at Candlestick Park in San Francisco, California. The Beatles kind of knew that this was going to be their last concert. Ringo Starr in the book Anthology stated, "There was a big talk at Candlestick Park that this had got to end. At that San Francisco gig, it seemed that this could possibly be the last time. But I never felt 100% certain until we got back to London." John, he wanted to give up more than the others. He said he'd had enough. So the group knew that it was going to be their final concert, recognizing its significance. John Lennon and Paul McCartney took a camera onto stage, and then they took pictures of the crowd, the rest of the group, and themselves at arm's length. Before one of the last numbers, George Harrison said, "We actually set up this camera. I think it had a fisheye, a wide-angle lens, and we set it up on the amplifier, and Ringo came off the drums, and we stood with our backs to the audience and posed for a photograph because we knew that this was the last show." So George Harrison told that to Keith Badman for the book The Beatles Off the Record. And then Paul decided to get the concert taped. As the Beatles made their way to Candlestick Park, Paul McCartney asked the press officer, Tony Barrow, to make a recording of the concert on audio cassette using a handheld recorder. The cassette lasted 30 minutes on each side, and as Barrow didn't flip it during the show, the recording cut off during the final song, Long Tall Sally. There was a sort of end-of-term spirit thing going on, and there was also this kind of feeling amongst us all around the Beatles that this might be the last concerts that they ever do. I remember Paul casually at the very last minute saying, "Have you got your cassette recorder with you?" And I said, "Yes, of course." And then Paul said, "Tape it, will you?" Tape the show, which I did, literally just holding the microphone up in the middle of the field. As a personal souvenir of the occasion, it was a very nice thing to have, and the only difference was that it wasn't a spectacular occasion. It was nothing like Shea Stadium. There was nothing special about it at all, except that the Beatles did put in extra ad-libs and link material which they hadn't put in before on any other occasions. So Tony Barrow told this to Keith Badman for the Beatles Off the Record book. And then there's a mystery about the bootleg. According to Tony Barrow, press officer for the Beatles, at the San Francisco airport, as our plane prepared to take off, Paul's head came up over the seat from a row behind. "Did you get anything on the tape?" I passed the cassette recorder back to him. "I got the lot, except that the tape ran out in the middle of Long Tall Sally." He asked if I had left the machine running between numbers to get all the announcements and all the boys' ad-lib remarks. I said, "It's all there from the guitar feedback before the first number," and Paul was clearly chuffed to have such a unique souvenir of what would prove to be a historic evening, the farewell stage show from the Fab Four. But back in London, I kept the concert cassette under lock and key in a drawer in my office, making a single copy for my personal collection and passing the original to Paul for him to keep. Years later, my Candlestick Park recording reappeared in public as a bootleg album. If you hear a bootleg version of the final concert that finishes during Long Tall Sally, it must have either come from Paul's copy or mine, but we never did identify the music thief. The attendance for the show, there were 25,000 people in the stands, with 7,000 tickets for the show left unsold. With the Beatles being paid a fixed $50,000 and Tempo Productions having to hire an orchestra to keep the local musicians union suite, the company actually lost money on the show. And the reason for the concert not selling out was that this was a very large stadium, and selling to 25,000 people is a great amount of people for a concert. Also, the fact that the concert wasn't heavily advertised, tickets were not widely available. Additionally, the Beatles were at the height of their fame at the time, and many fans have felt that they did not need to see the band live in order to appreciate their music. So the park's capacity was 42,500, but only 25,000 tickets were sold, leaving large sections of unsold seats. The Beatles took 65% of the gross. The city of San Francisco took 15% of paid admissions and were given 50 free tickets. This arrangement, coupled with low ticket sales and other unexpected expenses, resulted in a financial loss for Tempo Productions. According to goldradio.uk.com, despite the unsold seats and murmurs of decline, Brian Epstein said that the tour compared phenomenally well with their 1965 U.S. tour, adding that by the time we leave, 400,000 people will have seen this series of shows. So that's a big number there. So what made the Beatles want to stop touring? According to faroutmagazine.co.uk, the Fab Four decided to quit the road, and it could be boiled down to three main reasons. Firstly, the group had outgrown the venues. The development of sound systems couldn't keep up with the sheer size of the Beatles shows. Secondly, the group was exhausted from the nonstop performance. And then third, and most importantly, their 1966 North American tour came at the heels of John Lennon's extremely disparaging comments about rock and roll outlasting Jesus Christ and Christianity. The Fab Four were simply terrified for their lives, and considering one scary moment in Asia, the group's fears were not unfounded. When they had the Candlestick concert, they were in an armored car from the airport to the concert. And then Paul McCartney was saying, now this is some weird sci-fi thing from 2001 or something, Paul McCartney said, according to NME. It was a very weird place. What it kind of reminded me was, of those rough rides that the police do when they put you in the back of a van, but you're not strapped down, he added. At first it had been George and John bringing up not touring, but suddenly Ringo and Paul started to feel the same way. Before they all decided to quit, Paul had reservations. He said, I finally agreed. I've been trying to say, touring's good and it keeps us sharp. We need touring and musicians need to play, keep music live. But then he came to the realization that his bandmates had. And they could also not hear themselves play, which must have been frustrating. The equipment went through large stadium speakers, which weren't equipped to produce enough sound. So Ringo had to watch the butts of George and John and Paul and try to figure out the beat of the songs. And then we come to the concert. According to goldradio.uk.com, they came on stage to play their half-hour set at 9:27 p.m. It was the last of 18 concerts on a 13-date tour of North America, with the band playing 2 gigs on some dates. The Beatles had played in Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Toronto, Boston, Memphis, Cincinnati, St. Louis, New York, Seattle, and Los Angeles in just over 2 weeks before coming to San Francisco. Tickets for the last ever Beatles concert were priced from $4.50 to $6.50, which equals nowadays to $38.75 to $60, adjusted for inflation. So who opened for the Beatles? They had a disc jockey named Gene Nelson of KYA 1260 AM, and the support acts were in order of appearance: The Remains, Bobby Hebb, The Circle, and the Ronettes. The show began at 8 p.m. So the disc jockey told a story. He said, I was the MC, and as any Giants fans will know, Candlestick Park in August at night was cold, foggy, and windy. The funniest thing this night was with the warm-up act, Bobby Hebb. He stood up on the stage at Candlestick Park with the fog and the wind blowing, and he was singing Sunny. It was tough anyway to work a ballpark as an MC, especially as the Beatles were taking their time to get out. I was trying to entertain a crowd that was shouting, Beatles, Beatles, Beatles. And the dressing room was chaos. There was loads of people there. The press tried to get passes for their kids, and the singer Joan Baez was in there. Any local celebrity who was in town was in the dressing room, and they were having a party in there. And they were having a perfectly wonderful time while I was freezing my buns off on second base. So that's the Emperor Gene Nelson, and he told that to Keith Badman for the Beatles Off the Record. And the playlist that the Beatles performed that night was number 1, Rock and Roll Music. Number 2, She's a Woman. Number 3, If I Needed Someone. Number 4, Day Tripper. Number 5, Babies in Black. Number 6, I Feel Fine. Number 7, Yesterday. Number 8, I Want to Be Your Man. Number 9, Nowhere Man. Number 10, Paperback Writer. And number 11, Long Tall Sally. So to really appreciate this song list, be sure to look at Ron Howard's movie, 8 Days a Week, The Touring Years, and you'll see all the wild mobs of people, the screams, and you'll understand the reason the Beatles decided to stop touring. Another great way to feel like you're at the Beatles concert is to get the Beatles live at the Hollywood Bowl. And they said the Beatles only played for half an hour, but it is said that the crowd got its money's worth. So the Beatles were growing weary from life on the road. They didn't like it because they couldn't hear the music because of all the screaming girls. Things did get a little bit better when they started an experiment in the studio with Rubber Soul and Revolver. And then George Harrison noticed that there were more guys in the audience instead of mostly girls, so that kept the screaming down. but the Beatles felt a sense of relief knowing that they had finally decided to quit touring. That night at Candlestick, they felt sentimental, bringing their cameras to the concert to capture the moment. Paul even thought to get it recorded by bringing a cassette player and having their press manager record it. The only song that wasn't recorded in its entirety because the press officer forgot to flip the cassette over when the tape ran out on side one, so Long Tall Sally wasn't recorded all the way. But it's great that we have Ron Howard's movie 8 Days a Week. It gives the Beatles, the fans, the feeling of being right there in the moment. And I'm glad there are videos of their concerts as well as the recordings that they did live so that we can enjoy their talent and we can have in our collection as well as their studio albums. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, if you could give it a thumbs up, it would be greatly appreciated. I hope everybody's been having a good day, and tune in again soon for the Beatles Forever. Thank you. Bye.